Lady Shepsa here from Let Go, Let Goddess, sacred sexuality healer, coach, and author, coming to bring you a video going into depth with a question that I get a lot in my coaching programs, in my DMs, in my master classes. I go into a little bit, but I wanted to make this video to share it with you here and to get into the question, what is Tantra? What is Tantra? Tantra has become very popular here in the West, I would say in the last 30, 20 years, very recently as well. You hear the term Tantra thrown around a lot. You see all types of videos of, people throwing energy at people and they shaking and having all these orgasmic fits and things like that. And it's presented as Tantra. And there's just been a lot of mystery of what Tantra is, and there's been also a lot of different associations with the word Tantra. So I wanted to delve into it and get into the root of the word Tantra and exactly what it means and kind of what people think it means now and what has shifted. So a lot of times we think Tantra just basically translates to mean some type of orgasmic, freaky spiritual sex, right? Tantra is just become very synonymous with sex. And more specifically, I would say some type of spiritual sex or healing sex. So I want to get into the classical meaning behind Tantra and the word Tantra that really doesn't necessarily have anything to do with sex. And sex is great, and a lot of these practices that you see nowadays are very healing, but I think sometimes it can kind of veer off from the original meaning of what Tantra is about. So I want to get into that today. All right, so Tantra is a Sanskrit word, and Sanskrit is an ancient language coming from India. And it is a word with various meanings, such as theory, such as book, and doctrine. So Tantra, more specifically in this spiritual context, refers to inspired writing, sacred texts, scriptures that are believed to have been inspired by God and or goddess, coming from India starting around the 6th century. So Tantra more specifically refers to the set of spiritual practices, right, that come from these texts, right? So Tantra is kind of synonymous with text or doctrine. And in this situation that we're talking here, referring to Tantra coming from India, referring to these specific sacred texts and the practices that are within these texts. All right. So I want to also break down the etymology of the word Tantra to give you a little bit more insight into what is the meaning behind these words, and also connected to these spiritual practices. What are these spiritual practices that these ancient tantric texts refer to? So Tantra is said to come from 2 Sanskrit words, and I've seen this kind of written up 2 different ways. So the first word is tan or tanati, and it means to expand upon or expansion, to elaborate on. And the second word is triati, which means saves, protects, liberates. So these tantric practices, when you combine the words elaboration, right, expansion and liberation, what the point of these tantric practices are to expand us, right, so that we can then experience liberation, so that we can then be saved, from what these practices are talking about, which I'll get into specifically more, right? So specifically, that is the point of Tantra, to expand us, right? So that we can then feel liberation, freedom, be saved from the world. We'll get more into that. So traditionally, the tantric, I could say religion or spiritual system is lineage based. So what does that mean? It means that there is a guru or a master, and this guru or master passes down their specific knowledge and their specific practices to their disciples, we can say, right? So they're teaching from these ancient tantric texts, traditionally, right? Classical tantra, they're teaching from these ancient tantric texts, and then they're passing it down to their disciples. So it's very specific, and it's lineage based. It's going from teacher to teacher to disciple, teacher, and on down the line, right? So it makes for a very, of course, varied system, because different teachers or different gurus may approach different texts or different tantras different ways. They may have their own set of spiritual practices. These are initiatory systems, meaning that you have to be initiated by the guru who initiates you to his or her system of tantra. So these practices do not necessarily include sex. But within the tantric system, there were some sexual practices. So some of the beliefs that Tantra holds in general is that basically everything is divine, okay? Tantra is a system or a spiritual system that recognizes the divinity in everything. Divine is in us, it's in the air. Divine is swirling through the winds and the trees and the grass and through people, through every man, through every woman. You have the divine, or you have Shakti, which is the goddess, which is divinity in manifest form is Shakti. I'll do another video about Shakti later. But that is kind of the perspective of the worldview of Tantra. So because everything is seen as an expression of divine source in its myriad of forms, we see that everything is sacred. So this is very different than, I would say, more masculine based spiritual systems or beliefs that we see in the West and the East, that basically kind of says, oh, the world is impure, right? And we're trying to ascend to escape the world because, you know, the world is so bad, and we're just going to be the kind of monk in the cave, and our goal is just to transcend everything and not fuck with the world, basically, so that we can ascend and escape this horrible cycle of life. Whereas Tantra is a bit different. We're trying to liberate, yes, to overcome really the illusion of separation. The illusion of separation basically is the lie that we're separate from God, Mother, Father, God, and that we're separate from divinity, and of course that we're also separate from each other. So when you are focused upon that spiritual philosophy of Tantra, it's basically about liberating ourselves from the illusion of separation, which is what I was alluding to earlier when I said it's about expansion, right? And liberation. We actually are liberating ourselves from the lie of separation, that we're separate from source, that we're separate from the divine. So these practices that we do within Tantra, whether that be meditating or chanting or yoga or tantric sex, the point of it is to realize our divinity. All right, that really is the crucial point of Tantra, to realize that we are God, we are Goddess in manifest human form, and to have direct experience of the divine in our bodies, right? So we don't need to like shame our bodies. We don't need to say, oh, my flesh is so evil, and, you know, it's my body and my flesh that's keeping me bound, you know, that I just need to forsake it. It's like, no, the divine is in everything. So in the tantric philosophy, it's like, let us actually open up to experience the divine, the bliss of the divine through our everyday life and through these spiritual practices that help us to be able to actually see past this illusion of separation. Okay, so now within that, yes, sex can be a pathway toward that liberation, because sex is a very powerful, magical, mysterious act that is a reflection of divine masculine and divine feminine energy that in tantric philosophy combined to be able to birth creation, Shiva and Shakti. Okay, so sex can be this powerful vehicle to help us to realize our divine nature, to help us to see the divine nature in our partner, to see the God or the goddess in our partners. When we come together to make love, it can be this vehicle of transcendence, right? But the point is not necessarily to just have a bunch of freaky sex. And I want to make that distinction because that in some ways I see that that's what Tantra has become synonymous with meaning, and it really is not about that. So that's kind of my breakdown, my interpretation of what Tantra is based upon my studies. And I will also say it is very difficult to find really authentic tantric practices in the West, which is why there is a rise of something called neo-tantra. So neo-tantra is kind of the new tantra that people are familiar with, that really kind of deal a lot with sex, right? It deals with is more of a psycho spiritual approach to sex and sexuality. Now, I don't necessarily think that neo-tantra is bad. I think because Western culture is very repressed sexually, that we there's a lot of sexual healing that needs to happen. And I think there's some wonderful work that certain neo-tantra or modern day tantra teachers are doing, but there's also a lot of nonsense and it's a lot of bullshit that I see as well. And I just want to really make the distinction that the point of Tantra really is to realize your divinity, to realize your divine self. And I actually much more consider myself a teacher of sacred sexuality. That I am inspired by tantric philosophy, I always say, but I'm much more Taoist in practice. So maybe I'll do another video on exactly what Taoism is. But in short, Taoism is a philosophy that comes out of ancient China. And the word Tao actually means the way. And it's about living in a way that is in harmony with the Tao, or in harmony with the all, or in harmony with the divine, however you want to see it, in harmony with nature. So Taoism is a very specific, also ancient practice coming from China. And within Taoism, there are very specific sexual practices that are for healing, for transcendence, for health. There's a big focus upon health and immortality in Taoism. So in my coaching programs and in the work that I do, I'm heavily Taoist focused. And what you will actually see with a lot of the modern day Tantra, Neo-Tantra teachers and workshops, you'll actually see a lot of Taoist principles and Taoist philosophies, Taoist diagrams that are presented as Tantra, but it actually is Taoist in origin. So I always find that interesting, that people aren't really as specific. I like to be very specific, and I'm a nerd and I'm a geek, and I really, really love Taoism. And this is why it is a big part of my personal practice and what I teach in my programs. So when you see me talk about Qigong, when you hear me talk about the yoni egg or the jade egg, those are Taoist practices that come from this 5,000, maybe even more year-old system. So I hope you learned something today about what Tantra is. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments. And I always have a free masterclass happening. So if you see this video later, just go to my website, letgoletgoddess.com, or go to the link in my bio. We watch it on IG, and you'll see a link for a free masterclass. But I have a free masterclass called 5 Secrets Every Woman Needs to Know to Awaken Her Sensual Goddess, which is coming up soon. So you can click the link in my bio or with this video, sign up for the masterclass and learn more about tapping into your sensual goddess if you are a woman with the yoni. Okay? So many blessings. Thank you and bye.